Well, this is Storm Babette. It's doing its worst at the moment, although it just seems to have maybe relented a little. But it's pouring with rain in Norwich, and we're not on High Ash Farm for this portion of this week's podcast. Because Chris Skinner, where have you brought us?
Well, I brought us just to the outskirts of Norwich, right next to County Hall. And this is quite a sight in my childhood because there was the cattle holding yard where we're standing for Norwich Cattle Market, right in the centre of Norwich. This is where the cattle were kept overnight.
And then they were driven up into the city?
Driven up Brackendale past my school, and used to, at break time on a Saturday morning, so we had to go to school Saturday mornings, we'd lean over the wall and watch all the cattle being driven past by the drovers, take them down to be auctioned off right in the centre of Norwich, and all the agricultural merchants, Wiggs and Ben Burgess, where we are today, here in their stockyard for all the tractors, and all the other agricultural merchants were there selling all sorts of agricultural produce. Tilts were being made by Mr. Cox just at the top of Rouen Road that had been there over 150 years.
Hang on a second, what are tilts?
Tilts are sheets that, well, if you look at Norwich Marketplace today, they're all covered in lovely blue and red and white sheets over the top of the stalls.
Like awnings?
Yes,
yeah.
Awnings. And he made the tilts or the stack covers by hand, by sewing them in this really old building with all the old equipment in there. And it was just an education to go in with my father on a Saturday morning if you needed skips, which are sort of woven baskets. But the interesting thing I remember about leaning over that school wall, watching all the cattle being driven past, was as soon as they went past, some of them would actually poo on the road, which doesn't sound very tasty, and the next minute somebody would come out of one of the cottages on the other side of the road and gather up the poo with a little shovel and take it very hastily into their garden, almost rubbing their hands. You can't imagine that happening today.
It's very good for the roses, isn't it?
Yes, of course. Anyway, this site has completely changed. Ben Burgess moved out to the top of King Street, where their depot was, selling the early John Deere tractors. And today, our present podcast brings us right up to the present.
And actually we're being dwarfed here, aren't we, in this yard with all these great big green coloured vehicles with yellow wheels, and they're huge compared with us standing
Norwich
here.
City colours, of course.
Well, they are within a stone's throw of Norwich City football ground.
Yes, and here we are. This is the present, Matthew. Beside us is a John Deere tractor. It's a BRX model, and it's a 370, so 370 horsepower. It's unimaginable.
Well, extraordinary wheel arrangements here. They're like tank tracks, aren't they?
They certainly are, and that's to reduce the ground pressure, because that tractor weighs 12.5 tonnes. So if it was on tyres, it would compress the soil hugely. So that enables massive machines to be pulled behind it. And you can see the hydraulics at the back here. They literally lift a house. And that's how much they cost. This one we're sitting beside here. It's a brand new one. Registration 73 at the top there. Not been out on the farm yet, so no mud on it. That sets you back £250,000, and that's with the discount.
Whoa.
Yes. So, and that's what I mean about discussing the history of farming, as we've done for previous weeks, and bringing us right up to the present, because it's changed so quickly, and it's continuing to change. So these great brutes might be dinosaurs in as little as 10, 15 years' time, because the next raft of technology is coming on, and it's drone technology. And it's sowing the crops with drones, still with a pilot on the edge of the field, but controlling the drone, dropping seeds, and they're now experimenting with that advanced form of technology out in moorland to spray bracken. But first of all, you broadcast seeds on the bracken areas with the drone, and then the seeds drop down onto the ground. You then spray the bracken with glyphosate. The bracken then buckles over on top of the seeds, and you've got your perfect seed bed. So that's technology. So let's just go and look at some real brutes now.
Well, you mean this isn't?
This is a boy's toy, this one.
Well, the floor of the cab is higher than my head, and I'm
Yes.
6 foot tall. So really, the view up there must be amazing.
Absolutely, yes. Let's just go a little bit further. Let's hope Babette lets us, without being blown
It
away.
really is a filthy morning in Norwich. Through the puddles, and various bits of work going on in the grounds here of Ben Burgess. They're an agricultural supply company. I think they supply garden equipment as well, don't they?
Yes, they do. And so the early garden equipment is the size of the tractors that my father used, that he now used to mow your lawn.
You mean a ride-on mower?
Yes,
yeah.
ride-on mowers. Right, this tractor did come with wheels on.
It looks like someone's had the wheels away.
And the wheels are taken off and are at the front of the tractor. And the purchaser of this tractor is having tracks put on, just as we saw. So front tracks and rear tracks, which means you can take it on the road. Very low ground pressure. And again, it's a brand new tractor. And then if you want to see a real boy's toy, just walk this way a little bit. Satellite guidance on the top.
Oh my word, what is this vehicle?
This is 1,000 horsepower.
Oh, this looks
It's-
like we're at the back of a harvester here, aren't we?
We are. It's a forage harvester, self-propelled, and it is enormous. And that sets you back, wait for it, just over £400,000. So it's more than a house. And we'll just walk up to the front edge of it. We can. It's a bit of a stroll.
My word. These are magnificent machines, really. I mean, this brings out the 5-year-old in me with my Tonka toys.
Well, would you have this in your living room?
Actually, this looks like a vicious array of blades and wheels, doesn't
Yes,
it?
so it's a maize harvester for harvesting gas or for foraging for livestock feed for cattle, and it slices up the maize stalks, sort of absolutely chops them up into shreds so that they can be ensiled or used for gas production. And there we are. This is what I'm talking about, the present, and how far we've come from that photograph we looked at High Ash Farm website last week with my father ploughing with 3 horses and a Ransom's 2-furrow plough. And we've moved to this in under the 100 years, because there was virtually no tractors in the early 1900s.
And that equates to more mouths to feed, people
Yes.
eating more,
Exactly, and a huge population
and
as
a
well.
demand for cheaper food.
And that's where the sort of problem comes for younger farmers. So if you're a young farmer starting off in business, well, a decent, reasonable sized productive farm, say it's 500 acres, it's going to set you back 10,000 an acre. That's £5 million gone. Then you've got your buildings and your equipment, and most farms of a reasonable size will have around about or close to £1 million worth of gear to do their farming.
And this one vehicle with the array on the front's the thick end of $500,000.
Yes, absolutely, but it would probably be used by a contractor, and the contractor would move around various different fields. You can hear it's a hive of activity here. Little ride-on mower just going past. Wow. And that's the other thing, the noise is always a huge consideration. So inside that cab, you can have a good conversation. It's air conditioned, heated, there'll be radio contact, and it's a non-stop operation, and it's just come in for a service, this machine. But as I said, it's actually more than the cost of a house. And here's all the different implements behind us. There's ploughs, there's telehandlers, and it takes us back that we were talking about last week, right at the beginning of our programme, Robert Ransom, who was born in Wells. His father was a school teacher. He started the Ransom, Sims and Jeffries factory up in Ipswich, and he started making all the different moldboards for the ploughs. So he'd started off with the ones my father used, they were called UCN moldboards. Then he made some a little bit bigger and deeper ploughing. They were called SCN. And then later on, don't get too excited, boys, the double Ds. That's not a bra size, it's the deep digger ploughs, moldboard breasts. And eventually that factory's gone, and there's only one UK plough manufacturer left. That's called Hubert, and nearly all the other ploughs and implements that we can see around us are all imported now. Although there's still the Massey Ferguson Perkins engines still manufactured at Peterborough for the Massey Ferguson tractors, and of course you've got lots of different varieties of tractors. So there we are, Matthew. This is just a taster, and that wheel beside us that's just come off this
Must be
tractor
6 foot across.
it's at least that, and it's just unbelievable. So there we are, the traction. It's absolutely colossal. Look at it. Yes, so there we are. It's moving from wheels to tracks, but eventually I think we're going to be using drones to do a lot of the work. What a surprise.
Well, it is, isn't it? It'll be Skinner Airways.
Yes, why not?
Well, a big thank you to Ben Burgess for letting us come here and have a look at these amazing vehicles, and all John Deere, big green and yellow monsters.
Yes, and you can go to another manufacturer and the tractors can be red, or if you go to another one, sort of different colour green, and there's all different colours of tractors, but they're all pretty much the same, ultra modern.
Just like you. Well, we're back on High Ash Farm now, and it's still blowing a hoolie, and the rain is absolutely pouring, but I think most of it was overnight, Chris.
Yes, we've had some heavy rain overnight, and I think it's just beginning to ease off now, Matthew, and then the winds will take over about the middle of today, and that's the bit that's worrying because it's an unusual direction. 1953, we had a strong easterly here, and we had the floods all around the Norfolk coast at that time, and there was a windmill just over there behind us, and it took that over into the farmyard right where we're standing, and it used to power electricity for the farmhouse.
What about this tree here? This is an ancient tree that you've got reinforced with a metal cable, haven't you?
Yes, yeah, there's 50 metres of 1 inch thick stainless steel cable on it, and 2 big strops near the top of the tree, because I want to preserve the tree, but the cable comes from the south and the west where our normal prevailing winds come from, and today the wind's in the opposite direction, so if it did go, it would blow into the field and not hurt this lovely old agricultural building here, which was the dairy parlour for 10 abreast cows being milked simultaneously in there, and it's a lovely sort of warm stable block, and there we are. Anyway, this is why we're here today. It's pouring with rain, and this is an ideal situation to see the roof. They're Norfolk Pantiles.
Yes, I mean, they're really sought after these days, they are.
Yes, and it's so quite antique. They're probably made about 200 years ago, and more or less as good today as the day they were made, and beautiful deep red colour. But once you're away from the shadow of the tree, can you see they're covered in a sort of golden yellow film all over them.
Yeah, is that moss?
It does look a bit like moss, but it's actually called a lichen. All the lichens are really unusual. There's lots of them. This is a foliose lichen, so that means it looks rather leaf-like. And to save you climbing up on the roof this morning to have a closer examination...
I'm sure you'd love that.
it's like a skating rink up there. But what I did just before you arrived is climbed up on the roof.
You didn't, did you?
I did.
And then you've got a pan
I
tile.
bought a pan tile with us. And this is what we're looking at this morning. This is a lichen. There's at least 20, 30 species of lichen that you can easily find in the UK, more over in the west side of the country, but it's something that doesn't get that second look, and it's unique in the world because it's two plants, if you like, living together. An algae, which gives you sort of water, the green colour. Remember, we visited the water tanks on the farm a few weeks ago, and it was like pea soup. And you'll also see it on the side of trees, a sort of a green sheen at this time of the year. And the other plant combined with this is a fungi. So you've got yeasts and mushrooms and toadstools that we're all familiar with. Now, fungi don't have chlorophyll in, but when you look at algae, there's a top layer of fungi, then just under it, and it's only as thin as a knife blade, the sort of film of algae on the pantile here. There's a layer of algae just underneath the fungi, and then another layer of fungi hanging onto the tile. And it's a symbiotic relationship, and no other plant in the world has managed to combine two different plants as one entity. Now, a lot of controversy still going on, because some people believe the fungus has parasitized the algae, but some people say the algae benefits because on that roof, Matthew, in July, you can actually bake an egg on there, fry an egg even. It just is so hot. The angle of the roof faces the sun almost at 90 degrees.
And this survives.
And algae wouldn't survive in that situation. But they've discovered that the fungus actually protects the algae, and they live together, so it's a symbiotic relationship.
It's quite beautiful, really,
It's
isn't it?
beautiful.
It's a mustard colour,
Yes.
and it's very. It sticks proud of the tile, and it's almost like one of those 19th century painters with a palette knife has put it on.
Exactly that, and I've asked our ace photographer Laura Cuffin to take some pictures, and it'll be on High Ash Farm Facebook page, so you can actually see what we're talking about. And once she's got one of these macro lenses, very posh and modern, and you can enlarge this. It's difficult to see with the naked eye. There's all little cups over the top of this lichen, and it sort of spores will come off, but the spores have little algal threads attached to them, so it can start a new little cytoph. There's one there about the size of a match head just beginning to form, and it is so slow growing, Matthew, that it's unbelievable. Up in Arctic regions you get lichens growing up there, and they can be 3,000 or 4,000 years old. This tile is well over 100 years old. The lichen's probably been on there, and this round the edge of it is this year's growth. The estimated growth is about, in imperial it's 1/10 of an inch a year, in metric it's about 2 millimetres a year. So that one there, that's my finger is on at the moment, is probably about 40 to 50 years old. This one is very nearly the age of the tile. It's about 4 inches across.
So it shows the age of this roof,
Yes.
how developed this is now.
Yes.
You'll see this on many roofs, but never quite, well, not often, this developed.
No, and it's absolutely beautiful. The colours are as fashionable as fashion can be. That colour, it's a kind of auric, or it's a cross between gold and green, and it would be on all the catwalks as well, and has been for many years.
I bet you'd have your living room done like that.
Oh yeah, it's quite classy, isn't it? And you just don't take that second look. But it is a really important pollution indicator, because they're so unobserved, lichens and algae, that they don't have common names. So the proper name of this, if you want to look it up, is Xanthoria parentina, and it's spelt with an X, and Xanthoria. So there we are. Very, very beautiful, very underrated, and an unbelievable relationship between an algae, which is green and has chlorophyll, and a fungus, which doesn't have chlorophyll, and they're married in an inseparable way.
I'm a little worried as the rain pours down. You've got a big tile in your hand there.
I've put up a replacement.
Oh, you've put a temporary one in.
I put a temporary one in.
I'm sorry, I was worrying that would cause a hole on the roof.
No. I have a hole in my boot, but that's what I put my foot in.
Well, it is still raining, and we're next to the road that runs past the farmyard here, which is a Caister Lane, this, isn't it?
It is Caister Lane, Matthew, and it's very busy this morning. Everybody's heading off for another day's work in the city of Norwich. So it's only a 10-minute journey right into the centre of Norwich, so it's a really useful little road. And so we're been looking at things you wouldn't normally even see if you're out living in the countryside or in urban areas. And so we've just recently looked at some of the lichen here on the roofs of some of the buildings at the farm. Again, no common names for any of them. And it's the same with this plant on the ground in front of us. We're on gravel and it's always wet, damp and shaded here. And this whole area is a dark, deep green and is called liverwort.
Oh.
So
Right, this is a plant.
This is a plant.
I just thought maybe it's some, grass clippings or something.
no, it's
looking
got
at
chlorophyll in
I
it.
can see leaves.
And that's exactly why it does look like leaves on the ground, little flat leaves. It's called liverwort because of the shape of the little leaves that you pointed out. Is meant to represent your liver. So it used to be used for curing liver problems, although it never did. The early sort of doctors and medics way back used to think that if a plant looked like a part of your body, you could use it to treat the ailments of that particular part of the body. So this was used for liver treatment, but it's really lovely and very beautiful. And again, I'll get my ace photographer Laura Cuffin to come and take some photos of it. And it's a sort of plant you'd perhaps see around the edge of your greenhouse if you had one, growing on pots at this time of the year, at the top of the pot, these little green cup-like plants. So I'm just going to bop down. I won't get you on your hands and knees this morning, and I'm just going to put my finger under a little piece and raise it up.
Oh, yes.
And this is a really unusual plant, I suppose we can call it.
I mean, it's underwater this morning, but it loves the damp conditions.
Absolutely, it loves damp and shade. It can't stand drying out, but it kind of flowers at this time of the year. And these are the flowers. Can you see? They look exactly like, very appropriate today, umbrellas.
Yes.
Hundreds of them. And they are releasing spores. Now, liverworts are really, really clever plants because they can reproduce in two ways. By seed or spores from these little umbrellas, or from something called gemmi, which, if we'll try and find some, we've got to look at the top surface of the leaves and we should find some little cups. I'm just looking carefully. I've managed to pull a clump up with no visible cups on it. Still looking round. So what we'll do, I'll just get another
little piece. Yeah.
And in the water, just clean that up. Let's see if we can find some cups.
Lovely deep green colour.
It is full of chlorophyll, and they're tiny little star-shaped cups. And what happens is, on days like this, rain splashes into those cups, and they're exactly a cup shape, in fact, but looking like an upturned star, and they have little spores in them, little gemmi spores, and they splash out and start off a new plant. So this plant can reproduce sexually and vegetatively as well. So that's why it's really, really clever.
And it's really grown. There's a huge patch of it down here at the bottom of the farmyard, isn't there?
There absolutely is. It's an area of the farm that's not visited very often, so it doesn't get trampled on. As I said, it's incredibly common, and both that lichen we looked at and this liverwort are actually the foundations of a lot of our natural history. They form the base of it. Lots of slugs, snails, invertebrates feed on the lichen. On that roof we looked on earlier, at night time it's covered in slugs. They climb up the walls and graze on the lichen, and it's the same with this liverwort. It's really nutritious, very, very clever plant, and lots of animals, the ones you don't take a second look at, slugs, snails and centipedes, they'll all kind of feed on these plants, and really very underrated. Again, they don't have sort of common names, so it's really unusual. They have hugely long Latin names. So this one's called Marchantia morpholia. So, and it's so sad because they're perhaps some of the most important plants that we have growing in the world, and they grow all over the world like that lichen does.
Unheralded, uncelebrated
Absolutely.
until this programme.
Yes, until then, and that they fascinate me, all of them. And I was in Ashwellthorpe churchyard looking at some of the unusual lichen growing on the headstones, and I just moved one of the lichen. I could see a letter underneath, and as I looked at the writing on it, there was a saying on there which I've never forgotten to this day, and it says, "As you are now, so once was I. As I am now, soon you will be, so be prepared to follow me." A message from beyond the grave.